Hello YouTube, Professor Kadra here. Welcome to Tobacco 102, Main Types of Blend. In Tobacco 101, we cover the main types of tobacco leaf. Most pipe tobaccos, as we discussed at the end of that, are not single leaf experiences. They're
Right.
blends. Over time, certain blend families became common enough that pipe smokers began grouping them into categories. So these categories, they're not standardized. They're not perfect. These are kind of general. Different companies will use different terms differently. People will argue about definitions. It's kind of part of the hobby. But understanding that at least the major blend families will give you a much better idea of what to expect before you go into it.
And most of them are straightforward. There's some exceptions that are less straightforward, but a lot of stuff.
Yes, it's not to say that everything is constantly debated. There's more
agreement.
There's more agreement than disagreement. And it's kind of like you had asked a question in the pipe shapes video about the bulldog versus the Rhodesian. And,
Right.
That's the nuances. People aren't really debating everything about pipe shapes, but this specific little bit, there's a little bit of debate about. So we started Tobacco 101 with Virginia Leaf. I think it's only appropriate we start Tobacco 102 with Virginia Blends, which are blends centered primarily around Virginia tobacco. They're going to be emphasizing sweetness, maybe hay-like qualities, citrus, bread, dark fruit, stone fruit, and they're known for tremendous aging potential. The blends are varied. Some are bright and light, others deep and rich. They often reward slow smoking and a nice, careful cadence. And because of that aging, they're one of the blends families most commonly associated with cellaring or storing for a long period of time. Another kind of blend would be your burley blends. Those are going to focus more on, like a nuttiness or cocoa, earthy kind of flavors. They're often cooler smoking than Virginias, less sugary, very approachable. A lot of the classic, what they call codger blends, fall into this category. The drugstore blends that just anyone could pick up and pretty much have a good time with. And that said, they can range from simple everyday smokes to fairly complex mixtures. Some fantastic tobaccos are going to be burley-based blends. Another style would be vapor. That's VAPER, which stands for Virginia and Perique. That's going to combine your Virginia sweetness with that nice spice and dark fruit character that you get from Perique.
Yeah, they definitely complement each other really well.
They really do. It's like they were made to go together. And because of that, they're one of the most beloved blend families in pipe smoking. A lot of pipe smokers really like them. Depending on the ratio of the tobaccos in there and age, they can be anywhere from really bright and peppery to rich and very savory. And it could be a really nice experience. Very, very popular blend style would be English blends. Usually associated with Latakia, the presence of that smoky condiment tobacco.
Do they have to? Is there any English blends that don't?
I don't think there are. I think that's a critical component to what makes it an English would be the presence of Latakia, as well as the absence of flavoring when you get to the historical definition.
Right, you mean
English. There's kind of a historical definition of English tobaccos.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of good to touch on because there's a historical definition and then there's the more kind of modern definition. The more modern, so to speak, definition would really just be a tobacco without casing or flavor, anything added to it. You might call it English. So in that sense, there could be an English without Latakia if you're grouping your tobaccos to aromatics.
But traditionally, they would use Latakia in those historical blends.
Yeah, to provide flavor. When you're limited with what you can add for flavor, you're going to rely heavily on the very flavorful components that you are allowed to work with. They often include Virginias, Orientals, Latakia, sometimes Perique or other components. We talked about people debate what technically qualifies as an English, like we were talking about the old definition. Does it have to have Latakia? Generally speaking, if Latakia is prominent, people are going to consider it an English family blend. Similar, closely related to the English blends are Balkan blends.
That's something I never understood either.
And this is it's not even an agreed upon topic. There are people who think they're one and the same and that we should treat them that way.
They smell similarly.
They smell very similar. For me, it's that the emphasis is more on the Oriental tobaccos than the Latakia. There can be Latakia, but the emphasis is more on the other continental Orientals.
Okay.
Rather than the Latakia.
Which, as I said earlier, I have a hard time distilling those Oriental tobaccos, I haven't really found what they really are and provide yet. I haven't tried enough.
Right. So yeah, the Balkan or Oriental blends would probably really open that up for you.
Yeah.
That emphasis on the Oriental tobaccos will often give you like an incense-like, maybe spicy, sour, aromatic complexity to the blend. But yeah, definitions really depend on who you ask. And I mean, Balkan terminology, debating it might be as beloved as
you could almost consider it a subcategory of the English blends. Is that fair to say?
That you could. Yeah, if you were like limited to like what are the 5 tobacco categories, you would leave this one out.
Yeah.
We've mentioned aromatics. That's another category, very common category. If I'm not mistaken, it is the single most popular type of tobacco.
I think it's what a lot of people think about too, because you hear people smoking these, when their grandparents smoked a pipe or whatever, it was cherry or it was something like
Very
that.
often it was cherry.
A lot of times what we think, yeah.
And we've been talking about how great some of these other tobaccos are, but yeah, aromatics are still the king. It's sort of like Scotch. There's like all these within the Scotch enthusiast world, like people like single malt, single cask, this, that. Blended Scotch is still the absolute king of the worldwide market.
Johnny Walker. Yeah.
But with aromatics, main thing there is you got your tobacco with flavorings. These can be things like vanilla. We've mentioned cherry. Could be whiskey or other spirits.
Other fruits.
Chocolate. Other fruits. Maple. Various like other kind of
Irish cream kind of things.
Yep. They're extremely popular among new pipe smokers and old pipe smokers alike.
And they also well, you're about to get to the room notes and stuff.
Yeah. They're associated with a pleasant room note. So like they're a very good choice when you're not alone.
Right.
And if you want to enjoy some tobacco and you're concerned about how it might affect other people who might not be the most keen on smelling it, the aromatics probably not going to disappoint.
People usually like the smell of aromatics. When you're in a place where smoking is acceptable in the first place, and they're not just, what are you doing smoking here? They're pretty usually like, oh, that smells great.
Very typically.
Non-smokers.
Yeah, that's usually how they're received. Yeah. We're talking about them like they're all kind of one and the same, but they aren't. Some are smooth and easy. Others can be wet, hot, difficult to manage. It's definitely worth noting. They're not all perfect.
I find a lot of them tend to be wetter. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, because the casing itself is adding moisture into the whole equation, right?
Yeah. Related to aromatics would be like some kind of crossover blends. Some blends kind of combine aromatic and non-aromatic characteristics. You might see like a lightly topped English, maybe a whiskey or rum treated Virginia.
Right.
Aromatics with a natural tobacco flavor, but they still do have. That's what I'm smoking now. It's there is a pomegranate topping in here, but much more of the flavor. This is Founding Fathers.
So what is that? It's pomegranate topping on what kind of tobacco?
Primarily burley. That's what I get most of the flavor from. That I enjoy. Very chocolatey.
Nice.
Yeah. I think these kind of blends might often be called crossover blends. It's not a category unto itself, but just commenting that there's...
Yeah, you couldn't call it a straight English because it's got flavoring in it, and or a straight Virginia, because traditionally that means no casings of flavoring cases.
Yep. Finally, you got cigar blends. These are blends that incorporate cigar leaf into the mixture. It's not just cigar leaf, as your other pipe tobacco varietals. These tend to emphasize richness, earthiness, strength, body, some nice nicotine. Some are subtle, some are extremely bold. But then they are becoming, more popular now. As I know, Cornell and Deal has kind of a partnership with a cigar manufacturer. They release some things fairly regularly, new styles of blends. It's becoming they're experimenting more with it.
Yeah,
which is it's nice to see.
I'm wondering, what that's like, because they're probably getting tobacco sourced from parts of the world and stuff that they weren't even used to dealing with.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of tobacco comes from the United States or Africa.
But a lot of cigar tobacco comes from Honduras, Nicaragua, so
the Caribbean, Central America. Yeah. So these are blend categories. It's important to understand that they're just guidelines. They're not really classifications. They're not standardized. There's not, like industry definitions or anything like that. Like you have with, I mentioned Scotch earlier. There's no definition about what these various blend types are, in the way that there is a very, very precise definition about what makes Scotch or what makes bourbon.
Right. Yeah, it's not like a legalistic definition.
Yeah.
I'm sure at one point in history, right, there must have been like, you know, I guess I'm just speculating, right? You're in England and however long ago, and you have your English blends, and you're like, well, we got these couple of manufacturers, and they produce these really nice blends with Latakia, and there's maybe, I don't know, a handful of different tobacco. Same thing with your, aromatics. There's probably only a handful of manufacturers making various aromatics, and then the whole, over time, there's just more and more things, and it's harder to categorize as they create new blends.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, eventually you could get to the point where you have just a unreasonable amount of categories to deal with.
Right.
If you were to try to categorize everything specifically. All right. Thanks for watching.